The mist was the first thing you noticed at the north gate of the Aethelgard estate. It was an absurdity, a specific and expensive irrationality designed to solve a problem that shouldn't exist. The estate sat on the edge of the Mojave, where the air was dry enough to crack skin, but the biometric scanners, German-engineered, temperamental, costing more than the average home, required 60% relative humidity to read a retina with perfect accuracy. So, every 45 seconds, concealed nozzles in the obsidian pavement hissed, releasing a cloud of cool, synthetic fog that smelled faintly of ozone and expensive spa water. Kylo Vance watched the mist rise on the monitor. He stood in the command spire, a glass needle buried 3 stories underground, bathed in the blue light of 300 screens. He reached up, pushing his rimless glasses back up the bridge of his crooked nose, a nervous tic he had tried to train out of himself for a decade. They slid back down almost immediately. He ran a thumb over the silver streak in his left eyebrow, the only patch of gray on his otherwise dark head, a genetic anomaly that made him look constantly skeptical. On screen 4, the mist cleared. A car was idling at the barrier. It wasn't one of the usual SUVs with tinted windows thick enough to stop a sniper round. It was a vintage machine, a Jensen Interceptor, low and sleek, painted a gray so dark it looked like a hole in the world. It was silent. An electric conversion. The driver's door was open. The driver was outside, and Officer Ranim had her hand on her holster. Kylo felt the familiar cold drop in his stomach. Not fear, exactly, but the sickening sensation of disorder. The Aethelgard was not a place for guns. It was a place for invisibility. The billionaires, the sovereigns, the tech warlords who lived behind these walls paid $40 million a year specifically so they would never have to see a holster, a badge, or a frown. Status, Kylo said. His voice was soft, barely a murmur. The microphone at his collar picked it up perfectly. Subject is non-compliant. Ranim's voice crackled in his ear. She sounded tight. Ranim was good, usually. She wore a tactical cap pulled low over her hijab, and she had a jagged, distinct scar on her chin from a shrapnel incident in a life she never talked about. She was precise. She didn't panic. Define non-compliant, Kylo said, typing a command to zoom the camera. Refusal to lower sunglasses. Refusal to exit the vehicle according to Protocol B9. Verbal hostility. Kylo looked at the screen. The man standing by the car didn't look hostile. He looked bored. He was tall, very tall, perhaps 6'6", wearing a loose, unstructured linen tunic that looked like beige sacking, but draped with the heavy fluidity of raw silk. He was black, his skin a deep, rich umber, interrupted by a striking patch of vitiligo that curled up the back of his neck like smoke, visible even from the high-angle camera. He was leaning against the car. His arms were crossed. He wasn't shouting. Ranim, however, was stepping closer. Her partner, a new hire named Jensen, was flanking the passenger side. His baton already expanded. "I'm going up," Kylo said. "Sir, protocol dictates you stay in the—" "I'm going up." Kylo spun on his heel, his shoes making no sound on the anti-static floor. He hated going to the surface. The surface was where the variables were. Down here, the world was data. Up there, it was sweat and ego. But if a firearm was discharged at the north gate, the property values would drop by 12% before the casing hit the ground. The board would have Kylo's head on a pike. He took the express elevator. It rose silently, the pressure change popping his ears. When the doors slid open, the heat hit him. It was a dry, aggressive heat, fighting the artificial mist. He walked out onto the plaza. The scene was frozen, like a tableau in a museum of bad decisions. The man, the driver, had not moved. He was still leaning against the vintage car, looking at the sky. He seemed to be counting the clouds, though there were none. Ranim was 5 feet away. Her stance was aggressive, knees bent, hand hovering over the Glock at her hip. "Sir," Ranim barked, her voice pitched high, designed to cut through wind and traffic. "Last warning. Place your hands on the vehicle." The man turned his head slowly. He looked at Ranim. He didn't look at the gun. He looked at the scar on her chin. "I am already on the property," the man said. His voice was a low rumble, accented with a cadence that sounded British, but with a hard, Nigerian edge beneath the vowels. The sensors read my plate 3 miles out. You know who I am. You are performing theater. Hands on the vehicle, Raneem shouted. She unclipped the retention strap on her holster. Kylo accelerated. He didn't run running panic, but he walked with a lethal, clipped speed. Officer, Kylo said, pitching his voice to Carrie. Hold. Raneem didn't look at him. Her eyes were locked on the man. Subject has no credentials displayed. Vehicle is unregistered in the guest log. He tried to bypass the secondary checkpoint. Kylo stepped between them. It was a dangerous move, physically and politically, but he had to break the line of sight. He stood with his back to Raneem, facing the stranger. Up close, the man was imposing. The height was overwhelming, but it was the stillness that unsettled Kylo. Most people, when confronted by security, did one of two things. They became performatively submissive, or they became belligerent. This man was neither. He was simply present, as if the reality of the gun behind Kylo was less interesting than the dust on his shoes. Sir, Kylo said, clasping his hands behind his back. He rotated the heavy gold signet ring on his pinky finger, a nervous habit that ground the metal into his skin. I am Kylo Vance, Director of Operations. There seems to be a confusion regarding the entry protocols. The man looked down at Kylo. He looked at the glasses sliding down Kylo's nose. He didn't speak. We require biometric verification for all unregistered vehicles, Kylo continued, his voice smooth, reasonable, the voice of the system. It is for the safety of the residents. If you could simply provide identification, we can resolve this. I am a resident, the man said. Kylo paused. He knew every resident. There were only 42 estates within the Ethelgard. He knew the wives, the husbands, the mistresses, the drug habits, and the allergies of every single one. He did not know this man. I'm afraid I don't recognize you, sir, Kylo said, allowing a tiny, polite smile to touch his lips. It was the smile of a gatekeeper, denying entry to a nightclub. And I know everyone. Check the deed for Plot 4. The man said. Plot 4. The sprawling, minimalist glass compound on the ridge. It had been sold 3 days ago in a blind trust transaction handled by a firm in Zurich. The previous owner, a Russian oligarch, had liquidated it quietly. The new owner's name was buried under 6 layers of shell companies. Kylo felt a prickle of sweat at his hairline. If this was the new owner, this was a catastrophe. But if it wasn't, if this was a squatter, a journalist, or a threat attempting to bluff his way in, the risk was even higher. The deed holder is a corporate entity, Kylo said, his voice hardening slightly. Ethelgard Holdings. I am Ethelgard Holdings, the man said. He reached slowly toward his pocket. Don't! Raneem screamed from behind Kylo. The sound of a weapon being drawn was loud, a sharp clack slide of plastic and metal. The man froze. He didn't flinch. He just stopped moving his hand. He looked at Kylo. Tell your dog to heel, the man said softly. Before she bites something she cannot digest. Kylo's heart hammered against his ribs. The slur calling Raneem a dog was offensive, unacceptable. It triggered Kylo's own desire for order. You did not insult the staff. You did not bypass the rules. You did not threaten the system. In that moment, Kylo made a choice. He chose the protocol. He didn't tell Raneem to holster her weapon. He didn't apologize. He looked at the man with cold, bureaucratic disappointment. Sir, Kylo said, keep your hands where we can see them. Officer Raneem is following standard procedure for an unidentified hostile subject. If you are who you say you are, you will understand the necessity of security. If you are not, you are trespassing on sovereign private land. He saw the change in the man's eyes. It wasn't anger. It was something worse. It was a shutter coming down. The man decided, in that split second, that Kylo was not a person to be reasoned with, but an obstacle to be removed. Very well, the man said. Turn around, Kylo commanded. Hands on the hood, legs spread. The man stared at him for 3 seconds. 3 long, heavy seconds where the mist hissed around their ankles, obscuring the ground, making them look like ghosts floating on clouds. Then, slowly, the man turned. He placed his hands on the warm metal of the Jensen interceptor. He spread his feet. Pat him down, Kylo said to Raneem. Check for ID. wallet, phone. Raneem moved forward. She holstered her gun but kept her hand on the grip. She kicked the man's ankles wider apart. It was unnecessary. It was a humiliation. She patted him down roughly, her hands searching the linen tunic. Kalo watched. He told himself he was doing his job. He told himself that a black billionaire, if that's what he was, would appreciate the rigor of the security protecting his investment. He told himself that safety required verification. But deep down, in the part of his brain that wasn't wired to the security grid, Kalo knew why Raneem had drawn her gun. He knew why he hadn't stopped her. He watched Raneem pull a thin, black titanium card from the man's pocket. No numbers, just a chip. She handed it to Kalo. Her hand was shaking slightly. Kalo took the card. He pulled a portable reader from his belt and swiped it. The screen flashed green. Identity verified. Olatunji, Jeed. Access level, Alpha Prime. Notes, Chairman, Viridian Dynamics. Majority shareholder, Ethelgard Security Group. Kalo stared at the screen. The text blurred. Majority shareholder. This man didn't just own Plot 4. He owned the security company. He owned the gate. He owned the camera Kalo had been watching. He owned the contract that paid Kalo's salary. Kalo looked up. Jida Olatunji was still facing the car, legs spread, hands flat on the hot metal, head bowed in forced submission. The mist hissed again, louder this time, covering Jide's shoes, swallowing the evidence of the mistake, but doing nothing to hide the magnitude of the threat that had just arrived. Kalo opened his mouth to speak, but the words stuck in his throat like dry ash. Kalo did not gasp. He did not apologize immediately. He did the only thing the system allowed him to do. He finished the transaction. He handed the black titanium card back to the man. His fingers brushed against Jide Olatunji's palm. Jide's skin was dry, warm, and completely steady. Kalo's hand was damp. Identity verified, Kalo said. The words tasted like copper. Thank you for your patience, Mr. Olatunji. We have updated the local registry to prevent future friction. He gestured to Raneem. A small, sharp chop of the hand. Stand down. Raneem blinked. She didn't holster the weapon immediately. She looked at Kalo, then at the man, her eyes wide with the adrenaline of a kill that hadn't happened. She was still in the tunnel vision of combat. To her, Jide wasn't a shareholder. He was a target who had refused a command. Officer, Kalo said, his voice dropping an octave. Clear the lane. She stiffened, then stepped back, the Velcro on her holster making a tearing sound that seemed deafening in the silence. Jide Olatunji took the card. He slipped it into the pocket of his linen trousers. He didn't look at Raneem. He didn't look at the gate. He looked at the sky again, as if checking the weather was the only interesting thing happening in the Mojave. Friction, Jide repeated. The word rolled around in his mouth, testing the weight of it. Is that the word for it? We are entering a high-security alert phase due to the solstice events in the valley, Kalo lied. It was a smooth, reflexive lie. Protocols are sensitive. Jide turned slowly. He walked back to the driver's side of the Jensen Interceptor. He moved with a heavy, deliberate grace, like a predatory cat that had just eaten and had no need to run. He sat down, the leather of the seat creaking. Before he closed the door, he looked up at Kalo. I will require the footage, Jide said. The body camera, the gate camera, the audio log. Jide's eyes were dark, almost black, but the whites were stark and clear, unbloodshot. He tapped the steering wheel twice with his index finger. He wore no watch. His wrist was bare. Send them to my personal server by sunset. I'm afraid security data is proprietary to the operations center, Kalo said. The refusal was automatic, a reflex. You never gave up the data. Read the contract again, Kalo, Jide said softly. He pulled the door shut. The thud was solid, expensive. The electric engine hummed a sound like a trapped wasp, and the gray car glided forward. The barrier arm lifted just in time, clearing the roof by inches. Kalo stood in the mist until the tail lights disappeared around the curve of the oleander hedge. What the hell was that? Raneem asked. She was holstering her weapon now, her hands trembling. He didn't have a sticker. He didn't have a transponder. I followed the flowchart. Kalo turned to look at her. He adjusted his glasses. He felt a sudden, intense exhaustion, a gravity that pulled at the corners of his mouth. "You did," Kylo said. "You did exactly what you were trained to do. Then why do you look like you're about to throw up? Get back to the post, Raneem. File the report. Tag it Incident 409. 409? That's non-violent trespass. Just file it." Kylo walked back to the elevator. He needed air conditioning. He needed the blue light. He needed to wash his hands. Down in the command spire, the air was 68 degrees. It was scrubbed of dust and pollen, smelling of recycled oxygen and carpet cleaner. Kylo sat at his desk. He didn't open the footage files yet. He opened a blank document. Incident report. 2. 4 Oct 12. Location. Northgate subject. Resident Unit 4. He stared at the blinking cursor. This was the most important part of the job. Not the guns, not the cameras, but the narrative. The report was the shield. If it wasn't written down, it didn't happen. If it was written down using the correct words, it happened exactly the way the company needed it to happen. He began to type. At 9:42, security engaged a vehicle with no visible credentials attempting unauthorized entry. He paused. He deleted unauthorized. He replaced it with unverified. Officer on duty initiated standard challenge procedure. Subject demonstrated passive non-compliance and failed to produce identification upon initial verbal request. He stopped again. Passive non-compliance. It was a beautiful phrase. It turned a man standing still into a man resisting arrest. It turned silence into a weapon. It made Raneem's hand on her gun a logical reaction to a threat, rather than a panic response to a black man in a nice car. Kylo typed faster now, the mechanical clatter of the keys soothing his nerves. Verbal escalation necessitated tactical readiness. Upon secondary challenge, subject produced identification. Identity verified as J. Olatunji, owner, Unit 4. Situation de-escalated immediately. Subject released to residence. He read it back. It was clean. It was sterile. It was a lie that was technically true. Nowhere in the paragraph did it mention that the majority shareholder of the company had been spread-eagled on the hood of his car like a common thief. Nowhere did it mention the mist, or the fear, or the slur Raneem had swallowed but clearly thought. He hit submit. The file uploaded to the central server. It was archived. It was normalized. Kylo exhaled. He spun his chair around and looked at the wall of screens. Life in the Aethel Guard continued. On screen 1, a delivery drone was dropping a package of organic hydroponic kale at plot 12. On screen 5, the wife of the copper magnate in plot 8 was swimming laps, her strokes perfect and rhythmic. On screen 9, a gardener was blowing leaves off a driveway that was already clean. The machine was working. The glitch at the gate had been absorbed. It was Jensen, the junior officer. He was standing in the doorway of Kylo's glass office, holding 2 coffees in a cardboard carrier. "What is it?" Kylo asked. "Raneem is in the break room. She's pretty shaken up. She's saying he looked at her like she wasn't there." Jensen hesitated. "She wants to know if she's going to be docked for this." Kylo took off his glasses. He rubbed the bridge of his nose. He thought about Jide Olatunji's eyes, the way they had shuddered, the way he had asked for the footage. "Tell Raneem," Kylo said, carefully wiping a smudge from his lens with a microfiber cloth, that she followed the profile. "The system is designed to catch anomalies. Mr. Olatunji was an anomaly. She won't be docked." "Okay, good. I mean, the guy was weird, right? Who drives a car like that and doesn't put the tag on the windshield?" "Jensen." "Yeah? Don't talk about the resident." "Right? Sorry." Jensen left the coffee on the desk and retreated. Kylo picked up the cup. It was lukewarm. He took a sip anyway. He needed the caffeine to sharpen his mind for what came next. He had to send the footage. He opened the server logs. He found the file. Cam, North, 942, audio. He clicked play. The audio was crisp. The microphones at the gate were military grade, designed to pick up whispers. "Tell your dog to heel," Jide's voice rumbled through the office speakers. "Before she bites something she cannot digest." Kylo paused the recording. He stared at the sound wave on the screen. It spiked red where the word dog hit. He had a choice. He could edit the file. He could scrub the audio. Claim corruption. Send a sanitized version. It would protect Ranim. It would protect Kalo from having to acknowledge that he had allowed a resident to be insulted. But Jide Olatunji owned the company that made the software Kalo was using. If he checked the metadata and saw an edit, it wouldn't just be incompetence. It would be a cover-up. Kalo felt the trap closing. He opened his email client. He typed the address j.olatunji@veridian.secure. Subject: requested security logs. 24 octed. Attachment: 3 files, 4.2 gigabytes. Body: Mr. Olatunji. Attached are the raw logs from the Northgate incident. Please note that security personnel acted in accordance with Protocol B9 regarding unidentified vehicles. We apologize for the inconvenience and have updated your file to VIP status to ensure seamless entry moving forward. Regards, K. Vance, Director. He hovered over the send button. The cursor turned into a little hand, a pointing finger. He clicked. The email vanished. Kylo leaned back. The air conditioner hummed. The screens flickered. He waited for the phone to ring. He waited for the scream. He waited for the immediate firing. But nothing happened. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. On screen 4, the Northgate camera, the mist turned on again. It hissed, filling the empty frame with white fog, obscuring the view of the road where the tire tracks were already drying in the heat. A notification pinged on his desktop. Reply received, J. Olatunji. Kalo's heart skipped a beat. That was too fast. He hadn't had time to watch the footage. He clicked the email open. There was no text in the body, no threats, no demands for Ranim's badge. There was just an attachment. It was a calendar invite. Event. Security audit. Phase 1 location. Plot 4 time. Tonight. 20 attendees. K. Vance. Kalo stared at the screen. A security audit. Tonight. It wasn't a firing. It was work. Jide was normalizing it too. He wasn't acting like a victim. He was acting like a boss. And that was infinitely worse. Kalo looked at his reflection in the dark glass of the monitor. He looked composed. He looked professional. He looked like a man who was in control. But his hand, resting on the mouse, was gripping it so hard that his knuckles were white, draining the blood away, leaving them looking dead and cold under the artificial lights. The house on Plot 4 did not look like a home. It looked like a geometry equation solved in concrete and glass, cantilevered over the ravine as if daring gravity to file a complaint. Kylo arrived at 1955. He parked his company sedan, a white, unremarkable electric pod, next to Jide's Jensen Interceptor. The contrast was offensive. The sterile appliance next to the muscular, brooding classic. He checked his tie in the rearview mirror. He checked his breath. He touched the silver streak in his eyebrow. He walked to the front door. There was no handle. The wood simply pivoted inward as he approached, the silent hydraulics reading his fob before he even raised his hand. Inside, the house was acoustic zeros. The air was still. It smelled of raw timber and something sharper, like expensive gin. In the library, a voice called out. Kalo walked down the hallway. The walls were bare. No art, no photos. Just vast, empty stretches of white plaster that cost a fortune to keep flawless. Jide Olatunji was sitting in a leather armchair that faced the glass wall. Beyond him, the lights of the valley floor twinkled like a fallen galaxy. He was wearing the same linen trousers from the morning, but now he wore a heavy, knitted cardigan that looked hand-spun. His feet were bare. They were large feet, resting flat on the polished concrete floor. Kylo found himself staring at them. It was an intimacy he wasn't prepared for. Billionaires usually wore loafers, even in their bedrooms. Bare feet implied a comfort, a territorial claim that shoes did not. Sit, Jide said. He didn't turn around. Kalo sat on the edge of the facing sofa. It was too low. It forced his knees up, breaking his posture. Mr. Olatunji, Kylo began. I wanted to formally apologize for the... I have been reviewing the logs, Jide interrupted. He raised a hand, holding a tablet by the very corner, his fingertips gripping the bezel with surgical precision. The system flagged me at 9 hours, 41 minutes, and 3 seconds. The physical challenge occurred at 9 hours, 42 minutes, and 10 seconds. That is 67 seconds. Kalo blinked. Yes, The delay is due to the remote server handshake. 67 seconds, Jide repeated. He turned slowly to face Kylo. The vitiligo on his neck seemed to glow in the low light, a map of an unknown country. In my line of work, Kylo, 67 seconds is a lifetime. Markets crash in 3. Governments fall in 10. We prioritize accuracy over speed, Kylo said. It was the standard line. Do you? Jide tapped the screen. Your officer, Raneem. She has a resting heart rate of 58. It spiked to 140 when she saw me. Before I spoke, before I moved, Kylo went cold. How do you have her biometrics? I own the company that built her vest, GD said. His voice was devoid of arrogance. It was just a statement of inventory. The sensors are bidirectional. She reads me. I read her. He set the tablet down on a glass table. It made a sharp click. The system is working on a bias algorithm, Jide said. It identified threat based on visual profile, not behavioral data. That is inefficient. It wastes adrenaline. It wastes time. Kylo shifted. I can adjust the sensitivity parameters for your profile. Whitelist you. You'll never be stopped again. No, Jide said. Kylo froze. Sir, do not whitelist me. Jide picked up a glass of water from the table. There was no ice. If you whitelist me, the system learns nothing. It simply creates a blind spot, and I do not pay for blind spots. Jide took a sip. He held the water in his mouth for a moment before swallowing. I want you to keep the protocols exactly as they are, Jide said. In fact, I want you to tighten them. Treat Plot 4 as a high-risk asset. Log every entry, scan every package, patrol every hour. Mr. Olatunji, that feels unnecessary. It borders on harassment. It is data collection, Jide corrected him. I want to see how the organism reacts to a foreign body. I want to see how long it takes for the system to reject me, or for me to break the system. He looked at Kylo. The look was heavy, physical. Do it, Kylo. Authorize the enhanced monitoring package. Charge me for it. Make it official. Kylo hesitated. His flaw, the deep-seated need to please authority, warred with his instinct for self-preservation. This was a trap. He knew it was a trap, but the man giving the order was the man paying the invoice. Very well, Kylo said. I'll update the orders tonight. Good. Jide turned back to the window, dismissing him. Close the door on your way out. The pattern set in within 48 hours. Kylo issued the memo. Unit 4 requires Level 5 containment protocols due to high-value asset protection. He used the language of service to justify the mechanics of oppression. He didn't tell the staff to harass the black man on the hill. He told them to protect the chairman. But the result was the same. Every morning at 7, a patrol car parked at the base of Jide's driveway. Raneem was often inside it. She sat there, drinking coffee, watching the house. When Jide's vintage car rolled down the drive, she would pull out behind him, escorting him to the gate. To an outsider, it looked like a motorcade. To Jide, it was a convoy of suspicion. At the command center, Kylo watched the metrics. Subject, Olatunji, J. Interactions, 14 per day. AVG, stop time, 12 seconds. The delivery drones were rerouted to the central depot for secondary screening before being allowed to fly to Plot 4. Jide's mail was X-rayed. His grocery deliveries were unpacked and repacked by gloved security staff, ostensibly to check for contaminants. It was a soft siege, and the community began to notice. On Thursday, Kylo was in the estate's communal organic market, a terrifyingly expensive pavilion where residents bought artisanal honey. He was buying a sandwich when he heard Mrs. van der Hoven whispering to the wife of a tech CEO. "It's awful, isn't it?" Mrs. van der Hoven said, clutching a bag of heritage carrots. "The police are always at that new house on the ridge." "I heard he's in high-risk security," the other woman replied. "My husband says that usually means government witness or cartel connections. You don't get that kind of attention unless you've done something to deserve it." "Exactly. I told the children not to ride their bikes past the north curve. It just feels unstable." Kylo stood by the refrigerated display of kombucha. He felt a sick, oily slide in his gut. This was the feedback loop. The security team treated Jide like a threat, so the neighbors perceived him as a threat, which made them call security to report suspicious activity whenever Jide did anything normal, which justified the security team treating him like a threat. Kalo could stop it. He could walk over to Mrs. van der Hoven and say, "He is the majority shareholder of the company that guards your sleep. He is being watched because I ordered it, not because he is dangerous." But he didn't. Mrs. van der Hoven was on the homeowners board. She approved Kylo's bonus structure. Disrupting her narrative was dangerous. Kalo bought his sandwich. He walked out into the bright, blinding sun. He went back to the spire. Ranim was at the console. She looked tired but energized, the way people get when they have a purpose. "Sir," she said as Kalo entered, "we intercepted a package for Plot 4. What was it? A box of books. From a rare dealer in London. We scanned them. High-density organic material. Could have been hollowed out for storage. Did you open them?" "Protocol says verify," Ranim said defensively. "We opened one. It was just a book. Things fall apart. First edition." "You opened a first edition?" Kylo closed his eyes. "We wore gloves," Ranim said. "We taped it back up. It's cleared for delivery." She paused. "He's watching us, though," she added, her voice dropping. "When I dropped it off, he was standing on the roof, just standing there, watching me drive away. It's creepy, sir. He doesn't act right. He is the resident, Ranim. He can stand on his roof." "It's not that," she insisted. "It's the way he stands, like he's waiting for us to make a mistake." Kylo looked at the screen. Camera 4 showed the driveway of Plot 4. The box was sitting on the porch. The door opened. Jide stepped out. He didn't look at the box. He looked directly at the camera. He knew where the lens was hidden inside the faux rock landscaping light. He couldn't possibly see it from that distance, but his gaze was locked on it. Jide bent down. He picked up the box. He didn't inspect the tape Ranim had applied. He didn't look annoyed. He smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of a scientist watching a rat successfully navigate a maze to find the poisoned cheese. "He's smiling," Ranim whispered. "Why is he smiling?" "Because we're doing exactly what he asked," Kalo said quietly. "Nothing. Log the delivery. Mark it safe." Kalo walked into his office and shut the door. He sat in the dark, the blue light of the monitors washing over him. He pulled up the system diagnostics. The pattern was solidifying. The algorithm was now flagging Jide's movements as routine high threat. It meant that if Jide ever actually needed help, if he triggered a panic alarm, or if there was a fire, the system would hesitate. It would verify first. It would assume the alarm was a glitch or a test. Kylo realized then what Jide had done. He hadn't asked for the enhanced monitoring to test the staff. He had asked for it to prove a point that Kalo wasn't ready to see. Jide was letting them build a cage around him, bar by bar, report by report. And Kylo was holding the welding torch. He opened the daily log. He typed his entry. Day 7. Enhanced monitoring status. Optimal incidents. 0 community sentiment. Alert, but stable. He stared at the word, stable. It was the most dangerous lie he had ever written. Outside, the sun began to set, turning the sky the color of a bruise. The automatic mist system at the north gate engaged, hissing into the twilight, preparing for a night of perfect, blind order. Kylo locked his computer. He didn't want to see what happened next, but he knew, with the terrible certainty of a man who knows his own weakness, that he would come back tomorrow and do it all again. The Solstice Gala was the only night of the year when the Aethelgard estate pretended to be a community rather than a collection of tax shelters. The event was held on the Great Lawn, a manicured expanse of imported Kentucky bluegrass that required 40,000 gallons of water a week to keep from turning into Mojave dust. White tents peaked like sails against the darkening mountains. A string quartet played orchestral covers of pop songs, the music drifting thinly over the murmur of 200 wealthy people drinking vintage Bollinger. Kalo hated the gala. It was a security nightmare. He stood on the perimeter, near the catering tent, wearing his dress uniform, a charcoal suit that was cut too tight in the shoulders. He had an earpiece in his right ear and a tablet in his left hand. The screen showed a heat map of the lawn. Green dots were residents. Blue dots were registered staff. There was one red dot. Jide Olatunji had arrived at 20,014. He hadn't made a scene. He hadn't brought an entourage. He had simply walked down the hill from Plot 4, wearing a tuxedo that was midnight blue, almost black, with a shawl collar that looked like velvet but absorbed the light like a singularity. He stood near the ice sculpture, a melting swan holding a glass of sparkling water. The space around him was empty. It wasn't a physical barrier. It was a social exclusion zone, a radius of about 6 feet where no one stood. The other residents, the copper magnates and the tech heirs, flowed around him like water around a stone in a stream. They didn't look at him, which meant they were intensely aware of him. Status, Kylo whispered. Subject is stationary, Raneem's voice came back. She was on the roof of the clubhouse with a long-range scope. He's just standing there. Watching the band. Keep the channel clear, Kylo said. He watched the heat map. The green dots clustered away from the red dot. It was a perfect visualization of fear. The algorithm was tracking social distancing, interpreting the gap not as rudeness, but as anomaly avoidance. Then, the pattern broke. A child, a girl of maybe 6, wearing a fluffy white dress, broke away from her mother. She chased a firefly that had drifted into the exclusion zone. She ran right up to Jide. The crowd went silent. The string quartet missed a beat. Jide looked down. He didn't smile. He didn't crouch. He simply shifted his weight to let the girl pass. The mother, Mrs. van der Hoven, darted forward. She grabbed the child's arm with a violence that made the girl yelp. She pulled her back, glaring at Jide as if he had been holding a knife. "I'm so sorry," she hissed. Not to Jide, but to the air around him. "We didn't mean to disturb you." It was an apology weaponized as an accusation. "You are so dangerous that my child is at risk just by being near your shoes." Jide raised his glass slightly. A toast to the absurdity. "She is fast," Jide said. His voice carried in the silence. "You should let her run." Mrs. van der Hoven turned and marched away, dragging the child. Kylo looked down at his tablet. The screen flickered. Alert. Associated risk detected. Subject, van der Hoven. E. Status, contaminated. Kylo frowned. Contaminated? That wasn't a standard security tag. Contaminated was a biohazard protocol. He tapped the screen. The system had flagged the child. Because she had entered Jide's proximity, the algorithm had marked her as a potential variable. And because the mother had retrieved the child, the mother was now flagged yellow. Caution. The infection was spreading. "Raneem," Kylo said, walking away from the party, toward the dark quiet of the command spire entrance. "I'm seeing a glitch in the tagging software. It's marking secondary contacts as threats." "I see it too, sir. The whole north quadrant of the party is turning yellow. The system thinks the threat is airborne. I'm going to the server room. Maintain visual." Kylo hurried underground. The temperature dropped. The music faded, replaced by the hum of the cooling fans. He sat at the main terminal. He didn't go to the standard interface. He went to the back end, the raw code that Jide's company, Viridian, supplied to Aethelguard security. He needed to patch the bug before the system started auto-locking doors against the residents. He typed in his admin credentials. Access denied. Kylo stopped. He retyped them. Access denied. Level 5 clearance required. He was the director. He was level 5. He tried the override code, the emergency backdoor. Access denied. System locked by root user. Kylo sat back. The root user. There was only one root user for Viridian software. He pulled up the active log file, the command stream that showed what the system was thinking in real time. The text scrolled past at blinding speed, a waterfall of white data on black. He hit pause. He read the lines. Timestamp, 20 hours, 22 minutes, and 15 seconds. Input, subject J, Olatunji, resident. Timestamp, 20 hours, 22 minutes, and 16 seconds. Input, community reaction, negative avoidance. Timestamp, 20 hours, 22 minutes, and 17 seconds. Logic, subject behavior equals passive. Community behavior equals hostile. Timestamp, 20 hours, 22 minutes, and 18 seconds. Conclusion, threat source, identified as community. Kylo read it again. The system wasn't malfunctioning. It was learning. For days, Kylo had been feeding it, reports that Jide was a threat. But the cameras, the objective eyes, saw a man standing still while people panicked around him. The algorithm, designed to identify the source of disruption, had crunched the numbers. Jide wasn't the source of the disorder, the residents were. And then, the next line. Timestamp, 20 hours, 22 minutes, and 19 seconds. Action. Compile evidence packet B12. Timestamp, 20 hours, 22 minutes, and 20 seconds. Destination. Route, legal, litigation, drafts, civil rights, violation, Aethelgard. Kylo felt the blood drain from his face. He opened the file directory. He bypassed the GUI and used the command line to query the destination folder. It wasn't protected. It was sitting there, open, like a bear trap, waiting to be stepped in. Folder. Legal. Evidence. Exhibits. He opened the folder. It contained hundreds of PDFs. He opened Exhibit A, PDF. It was Kylo's incident report from the first day, the one where he changed unauthorized to unverified. He opened Exhibit C, PDF. It was the log of the enhanced monitoring Kylo had ordered. He opened Exhibit F, PDF. It was an audio file of Raneem calling Jide a threat while he was reading a book. And then, the master document. Draft, complaint, civil, action. No, 24-909. Kylo read the header. Plaintiff, Jide Olatunji defendant, Aethelgard Homeowners Association and Aethelgard Security Group. Claim, systematic harassment, racial profiling, and breach of the Quiet Enjoyment Covenant. Plaintiff asserts that the defendants have utilized a security apparatus to create a hostile living environment, reducing the property value of Plot 4 by an estimated 15%, $4, 2 M. Evidence. Daily security logs provided by Director Kylo Vance, demonstrating a pattern of unfounded surveillance initiated without cause. Kylo stared at his own name. Provided by Director Kylo Vance. He wasn't the investigator. He wasn't the gatekeeper. He was the stenographer. Every report he had written, every normalized lie, every time he had justified Raneem's aggression or the community's fear, he had been documenting the company's guilt. Jide hadn't asked for the footage to check on his own safety. He had asked for it to build the discovery file. The enhanced monitoring wasn't a trap for Jide. It was a trap for Kylo. And Kylo had walked right into it, signed the logbook, and handed over the keys. Sir? Raneem's voice in his ear was sharp. Sir, you need to come up. Now. What is it? Kylo asked. His voice sounded hollow, like it was coming from a dead man. The subject, Mr. Olatunji. He's moving toward the main stage. And the sprinklers. The system just armed the sprinklers. Override it, Kylo said automatically. I can't. It says, Threat Mitigation Protocol active. Sir, the system is targeting the crowd. Kylo ran. He sprinted up the stairs, bursting out into the warm night air. The scene on the great lawn was surreal. Jide was standing near the microphone stand, where the string quartet had just finished. He was looking at his phone. He tapped the screen once. A distinct, mechanical thunk hiss echoed across the lawn. The irrigation sprinklers, 50 high-pressure heads concealed in the grass, popped up simultaneously. But they didn't spray water. They sprayed the mist. The same, thick, expensive, ozone-smelling fog used at the North Gate. It erupted in silent, white columns, rolling over the grass, engulfing the tables, the white tents, the women in their gowns, and the men in their tuxedos. Screams broke out, not of pain, but of confusion. The fog was dense, disorienting. Visibility dropped to 0 in seconds. The wealthy residents of Aethelgard were suddenly blind, stumbling into each other, knocking over champagne towers, lost in a white void. What is happening? Raneem shouted over the comms. I can't see anything. Do I engage? Stand down, Kylo screamed. Do not engage. He stood at the edge of the fog bank. It was a wall of white, and out of the mist, a figure walked toward him. Jide Olatunji emerged from the cloud. He wasn't running. He wasn't stumbling. He knew exactly where he was going. The mist curled off his shoulders like steam. He stopped 3 feet from Kylo. The chaos behind him was loud shouts of security, the crash of glass, the crying of the child. Jide looked at Kylo. His expression was one of mild, scientific interest. The system identified a threat, Jeed said. His voice was calm, cutting through the panic. It determined that the crowd was hostile to the resident of Plot 4. It deployed a non-lethal countermeasure to obscure the target. He stepped closer. You taught it to do that, Kalo. You taught it that I was the priority. You told it to watch me, to protect the asset. Jide gestured back at the screaming whiteout fog. It is protecting me. Kalo looked at the chaos. He looked at the man who had turned the machine against its masters simply by following the rules. You're going to be sued, Kylo whispered. They'll destroy you. Jide reached into his pocket. He pulled out the black titanium card. He tapped it against Kylo's chest. Read the logs, Director, Jide said. The system acted automatically based on your threat assessment data. I didn't touch a thing. He walked past Kylo, toward the parking lot, leaving the Athelgard estate drowning in the very mist they had paid for, choking on their own expensive security. Kylo stood there, the damp fog chilling his skin, and realized the terrifying truth. The system hadn't failed. It had worked perfectly. And that was the end of everything. The morning after the gala, the sky over the Mojave was a hard, relentless blue, the kind of color that denied the possibility of clouds or mercy. Inside the command spire, the silence was heavy. It wasn't the quiet of efficiency. It was the quiet of a tomb before the looting begins. Kalo sat at the central desk. His tie was gone. His collar was unbuttoned. On the screen in front of him, the Incident 409 file was open. The board meeting had lasted 3 hours. It had been conducted over a secure video link, the faces of the 5 most powerful residents floating in 4K resolution against the dark walls of the spire. They were not screaming. People with that much money didn't scream. They whispered, and the world leaned in to listen. Mrs. van der Hoven had done most of the talking. She sat in her white living room, her hair perfectly reconstructed after the humidity of the mist. It is not about the water damage, Mr. Vance, she had said, sipping tea from a cup that cost more than Kylo's car. It is about the breach of trust. We pay for a dome. We pay for a reality where the variables of the outside world, chaos, weather, people, do not touch us. Last night, we were touched. We are analyzing the algorithm, Kylo had tried to explain. The predictive modeling software interpreted the crowd density as a riot condition. I don't care about the math, she interrupted softly. I care about the liability. If the system is broken, we replace the system. If the operator is broken, we replace the operator. She leaned forward. Mr. Olatunji's lawyers contacted us at 6. He is not suing. Kalo froze. He's not? No. He is offering a settlement. He agrees to drop the civil rights complaint and the property devaluation suit. In exchange, he wants a seat on the Security Oversight Committee, and he wants an official finding of human error for the incident last night. The trap clicked shut. Kalo heard it as clearly as a deadbolt sliding home. Human error, Kalo repeated. Precisely. Mrs. van der Hoven said, Machines do not make mistakes, Mr. Vance. That is the marketing pitch of your company, is it not? Flawless automation. If the machine made a mistake, then the company is liable, the property values crash, and we lose our insurance rating. But if a person made a mistake, well, that is a tragedy. But it is contained. She paused. She looked at Kalo with eyes that were as cold and dead as the camera lens she was staring into. Give us a name, Kylo. By noon. The screen went black. Kylo sat in the blue light. He looked at the log files. He knew the truth. The machine hadn't failed. It had done exactly what Kylo had taught it to do. Prioritize the Alpha Prime asset, Jide, and neutralize the hostile grouping, the neighbors. It was a perfect execution of biased logic. To save the contract, to save the company, and to save himself, the system required a body. The door to the office slid open. Officer Raneem stood there. She looked smaller today. Without the tactical vest, wearing a standard gray hoodie and fatigue pants, she looked young. She was holding a tablet. Her hands, usually so steady on a weapon, were picking at the frayed edge of her sleeve. Sir, she said, I finished the perimeter check. Plot 4 is quiet. Mr. Olatunji is. He's sitting by his pool, reading. Come in, Raneem, Kalo said. Sit down. She sat. She didn't lean back. She sat on the edge of the chair, knees together, ready to stand at a command. She had a small, white bandage on her neck, where a woman's diamond bracelet had scratched her in the panic last night. "They're talking about firing people," Raneem said quietly. "I heard Jensen talking to HR. "The board is upset," Kylo said. He rotated the gold ring on his pinky finger, grinding the metal, grinding the skin. "They want accountability." "I told them I couldn't override it," Raneem said, her voice rising in pitch. "I hit the kill switch 3 times. The system locked me out. It said root override active. That's not on me, right? That's the code." Kylo looked at her. He looked at the scar on her chin, the badge of her service in a war she never discussed. He looked at the loyalty in her eyes. She believed in the chain of command. She believed that if she followed the rules would protect her. She was the perfect officer, and that was why she was the perfect sacrifice. "Raneem," Kylo said, "do you remember the log entry from Tuesday? The package delivery? The books? Yes, I scanned them. You called the resident a threat on the open channel. It's on the audio log. I was just reporting my assessment. He was acting strange. And the day at the gate," Kylo continued, his voice gentle, paternal. "You drew your weapon on a resident who had not displayed a weapon. He refused a command." "He hesitated," Kylo corrected. "The logs show he hesitated." Raneem went still. She sensed the shift in the air. The temperature in the room hadn't changed, but she shivered. "Sir," she whispered, "what are you doing?" Kylo turned his monitor so she could see it. He had opened the master event log for the gala. Line 404 read, "System auto trigger, missed deployment." Kylo highlighted the line. His cursor blinked at the beginning of the text. "The board needs a finding of human error," Kylo said. "If the system is at fault, the estate loses its insurance. The company goes under. We all lose. You, me, Jensen, everyone." "But the system was at fault," Raneem said. "The system is a machine," Kylo said. "It doesn't have a mortgage. It doesn't have a pension." He looked at her. "If I file this as a system failure, Raneem, we are all fired. Today, the contract is voided." "So?" she challenged, a spark of her old fire returning. "So, we tell the truth. And then?" Kylo asked. "You think you'll get another job in private security? With a system failure on your record? With the video of you drawing a gun on a black billionaire circulating in Discovery?" Raneem went pale. "But if it's human error," she trailed off. "If it's human error," Kylo said softly. "It's a mistake, a panic reaction. You saw a threat in the crowd. You hit the wrong button. You deployed the mist to separate the combatants. It was poor judgment, Raneem, but it was protective judgment. You want me to take the blame," she said. The realization hit her like a physical blow. She slumped back in the chair. "I can protect your pension," Kylo lied. He didn't know if he could. "I can ensure you get a severance, a reference for a different sector, maybe logistics." "I'm a security officer," she said. "It's all I am." "Not here," Kylo said. "Not anymore." He waited. This was the moral trap. He could refuse. He could tell Mrs. van der Hoven to go to hell. He could upload the real logs, expose Jide's manipulation, expose his own biased data entry, and burn the Aethelgard to the ground. It would be the righteous thing to do. But Kylo Vance was not a righteous man. He was a man who valued order, and disorder was the enemy. "Do it," Raneem whispered. Her voice was broken. "I need you to confirm it," Kylo said. He needed her complicity. He couldn't just frame her. He needed her to step into the cage willingly. For the report, Raneem looked at the floor. She looked at her combat boots, scuffed from running into the mist to save people who despised her. I panicked," she recited, her voice dead. "I misidentified the threat level. I manually deployed the countermeasures." Kylo typed as she spoke. "Incident finding. Human error. As officer, Raneem. S. Action. Manual override of safety protocols. Result. Termination of employment." He hit submit. The file uploaded. The glitch was erased. The narrative was sealed. "Leave your badge on the desk," Kylo said. He didn't look at her. He couldn't. Raneem stood up. She unclipped the silver shield from her belt. She placed it on the glass surface. It made a hollow clink. She walked out of the office. She didn't slam the door. She didn't say goodbye. She just vanished into the hallway, a ghost exorcised from the machine. Kylo sat alone. The phone rang. It was Jide Olatunji. Kylo stared at the caller ID. He felt a wave of nausea, hot and acidic. He answered, "Mr. Vance." Jide's voice was warm, rich, terrifyingly calm. "It's done," Kylo said. "I saw the update," Jida said. "Efficient." "She was a good officer," Kylo said. The words felt like gravel in his throat. "She was a blunt instrument," Jide corrected, "and blunt instruments damage the furniture." There was a pause, a silence that stretched across the fiber optic lines, connecting the underground bunker to the glass house on the hill. "You have saved the system, Kylo," Jide said. "You have preserved the property values. You have kept the peace. You should be proud." "I sacrificed an innocent woman." "No," Jide said. "You prioritized the survival of the institution. That is what directors do. That is why you are useful." Useful. The word hung in the air. "Come to the house tonight, Kylo," Jide said. "We have the first meeting of the new oversight committee. I have some ideas for optimizing the algorithms. Since we have removed the human error." The line clicked dead. Kylo put the phone down. He looked at the badge on his desk. It caught the reflection of the blue screens. He had survived. The Aethelguard had survived. The gate was secure. The mist would run on schedule. But as he looked at his own reflection in the darkened window, Kylo saw the truth. He hadn't just fired Ranim. He had become the thing Jide Olatunji needed him to be. He was no longer the gatekeeper. He was the gate, and Jide held the remote. The transition was seamless, as all expensive things are. 3 months after the Solstice Gala, the Aethelguard estate was quieter than it had ever been. The silence wasn't the absence of noise, it was the presence of a heavier, more sophisticated control. The mist at the north gate had been recalibrated. It no longer hissed. It simply appeared, a phantom wall of molecular humidity that rose from the ground in perfect synchronization with the approach of any vehicle worth less than 6 figures. Kylo Vance sat in the command spire. His office had been upgraded. The glass was thicker. The chair was ergonomic mesh, imported from Sweden. On his desk, where Ranim's badge had once rested, sat a new terminal, a sleek, black monolith of screen real estate dedicated entirely to the oversight feed. The feed monitored the security of exactly one resident. Kylo watched Screen 1. The Jensen Interceptor glided down the winding road from Plot 4. It moved like a shark through dark water. As it approached the gate, the barriers didn't just lift. They retracted into the ground, vanishing completely, submitting to the vehicle's presence. The biometric scanners didn't flash red. They didn't even query the database. They simply logged the event. Asset transit. Authorized. There was no Ranim to step out. There was no Jensen to tap a baton. The human element at the gate had been removed entirely, replaced by high-speed drones that hovered silently in the oleanders, their lenses trained on the license plates of everyone except Jide Olatunji. Kylo adjusted his glasses. They still slid down his nose. The nervous habit remained, but the fear behind it had calcified into a dull, rhythmic duty. He touched the gold ring on his pinky. It felt loose now. He had lost weight. "Director?" A voice came through the intercom. It was the new automated assistant, a synthetic voice that sounded vaguely maternal. "The Oversight Committee is assembled in the boardroom. Mr. Olatunji is requesting your attendance." "I'm coming," Kylo said to the empty room. He stood up. He smoothed the front of his suit. It was a new suit, tailored, expensive, a bonus from the board for excellent crisis management. It fit him perfectly, which meant it felt like a second skin he couldn't shed. He took the elevator up. The sunlight on the plaza was blinding, but the windows of the boardroom were tinted to a soothing, perpetual twilight. Mrs. van der Hoven was there, sitting at the head of the mahogany table. She looked radiant, her fear of the contaminated child long forgotten. Beside her sat the copper magnate and the tech CEO, and at the other end, casually dominating the room, sat Jide. He wasn't wearing a suit. He was wearing a loose, white cotton shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing the vitiligo on his forearms, the patterns distinct and unapologetic against his dark skin. He was barefoot. His shoes were under the table. It was the ultimate power move, to be undressed in a room full of armor. "Ah, Kylo," Jide said, smiling. It was the smile of a man who has taught a dog a difficult trick. "Please, sit." Kylo took the empty chair. It was positioned between the residents and Jide, acting as a buffer. "We were just discussing the quarterly metrics," Mrs. van der Hoven said, tapping her tablet. "Since the implementation of the Olatunji protocols, incident reports are down 90%. The property values in the North Quadrant have rallied. We're up 6 points. Security is a feeling," Jide said softly. "It is the absence of variables." He looked at Kylo. "Tell them about the new algorithm, Director." Kylo cleared his throat. He opened his folder. He knew the numbers by heart. He had written the code himself, under Jide's supervision, late at night when the guilt was too loud to sleep. "The new system," Kylo said, his voice steady, "inverts the traditional threat model. Instead of profiling for intrusion, we profile for net worth stability." He gestured to the screen on the wall. A map of the estate appeared. "We now track the financial health of every visitor in real time. Credit scores, liquidity, legal exposure. If a vehicle approaches the gate and the driver has a net worth below the threshold, the system engages the hard filter. If they are above the threshold, the system becomes invisible." The room was silent. "It's brilliant," the tech CEO whispered. "It's not racial, it's not political, it's purely economic." "It is efficient," Jide corrected. "It removes the bias of the human eye and replaces it with the bias of the ledger." Kylo looked at Jide. He saw the trap in its final form. Jide hadn't fought the system to destroy it. He hadn't fought it to make it fair. He had fought it to make it accurate. He had proven that a black billionaire was not a threat to the estate. He was the estate's natural apex predator. The threat was the poor, the desperate, the messy humanity that Ranim represented. And Kylo had helped him build the wall that kept them out. "There is one loose end," Mrs. van der Hoven said, frowning slightly. "The former officer. Ranim." Kylo's heart skipped a beat. "What about her?" "She has filed an appeal with the labor board," Mrs. van der Hoven said, disgusted, claiming wrongful termination, claiming she was ordered to override the system. All eyes turned to Kylo. This was the final test, the loyalty check. Jide leaned back, lacing his fingers behind his head. He watched Kylo with eyes that held no judgment, only expectation. He was waiting to see if his tool was still sharp. "The logs are clear," Kylo said. His mouth felt dry. The finding was human error. Officer Ranim panicked. She admitted it in her exit interview. The system data confirms it. "So, we can dismiss the claim?" Mrs. van der Hoven asked. "I will handle it," Kylo said. "I will testify if necessary. The narrative holds." Jide nodded. A small, almost imperceptible nod. "Good," Jide said. "Then the matter is closed." The meeting ended. The residents filtered out, shaking Kylo's hand, thanking him for his vigilance. Jide remained seated. When the room was empty, Kylo stood to leave. "Kylo," Jide said. Kylo stopped. "Sir, do you know why I bought Plot 4? Kylo turned. "Because of the view, the privacy." "No," Jide said. He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the scorched desert landscape. "I bought it because I wanted to see if I could make the mountain bow to me." He turned to face Kylo. The silver light from the window caught the vitiligo on his neck, making it look like a map of the world burning. "People think racism is a wall," Jide said quietly. "It is not. It is a toll booth. If you cannot pay, it stops you. If you can pay, it opens. And once you are inside, Kylo, you realize that the only thing that matters is keeping the gate closed behind you." He walked over to Kylo. He was close enough that Kylo could smell the scent of him, ozone and old paper. "You are a good gatekeeper, Kylo. You understand that the gate must never be open to everyone, only to us." He patted Kylo on the shoulder. It was a heavy, possessive touch. "Go back to the spire. Watch the screens. I have a delivery coming at 3. Kylo walked out. He took the elevator down to the basement. He walked past the server room, where the lights blinked in a frantic, silent, binary code. He sat at his desk. He pulled up the personnel file for Ranim. Status, terminated. Eligibility, do not rehire. Notes, security risk. He stared at the words, security risk. Ranim, who had followed every rule. Ranim, who had tried to protect the people who despised her. She was the risk, and Jide Olatunji, who had weaponized the mist and bought the law, was the asset. Kalo closed the file. He opened the live feed of the North Gate. A delivery truck was approaching. It was an old van, rusted at the wheel wells. The driver was a young man, Hispanic, wearing a faded cap. He looked tired. The system read the plate. It ran the credit check. Alert. Low liquidity. Threat level, elevated. The mist nozzles engaged. The barrier locked. The drone lifted off its perch, a black hornet buzzing toward the windshield. Kylo watched. He could override it. He could press the green button. He could let the man through. But the camera in the corner of his office was watching him, and the man on the hill was watching the data. Kylo Vance did not press the button. He watched the drone hover. He watched the driver raise his hands in confusion. He watched the mist swallow the van, erasing the poverty from the view of the residents. He leaned back in his mesh chair. He adjusted his glasses. He felt safe. He felt terrible. And he knew, with a final, crushing certainty, that he would never leave this room. The system hummed, perfect and cold, eating the world one variable at a time. Thinking about the price of admission is often the only thing that distracts us from the cost of staying inside.